Welcome to the 6th Annual Cyber Threat Symposium with H2O Solutions, Prevail, and Trusted Internet. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jonathan Hard. I'm the CEO of H2O Solutions, and we were determined not to let COVID-19 cancel our symposium because we're not going to let it affect our capabilities to give out good information to the public. So we have over 100 people that have registered virtually, and we're going to go ahead and proceed with the symposium. So our first speaker today is Mr. Steve Shirley, who is the Executive Director of the ND-ISAC. And so I've known him for a few years. He used to be the Executive Director for DC3, which is the DoD Cyber Crime Center. He brings a wealth of knowledge and capability with his current position. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Steve Shirley and let him tell you how the ND-ISAC can help and is helping with the defense industrial base supply chain efforts from a security standpoint.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Jonathan, and everyone. If I can get smart enough to share my screen here, I'll show you some slides. But thank you very much for the invitation. I'm pleased to be your _1 batter, and you've got a great lineup of power hitters with Jeff Stutzman and Bob Armstrong and Bob Metzger to follow up. So if you'll bear with me just a second here, I'll see if I can figure this out, and we'll get underway here. But while I'm doing that. So what is ND-ISAC? National Defense Information Sharing and Analysis Center is one of about 26 entities that are nonprofit organizations that are encouraged by a constellation of policies that are owned by the Department of Homeland Security with respect to critical infrastructure. And hold on here. Let me see if I've got this going here. He said, hopefully. And no kidding, we practice this, but you know what? I used to work at a place where when something in a field trial went south, we used to say, well, geez, it worked great in the lab. And so right now we're going through an iteration of that, unfortunately. But but let me continue with a voice track here, and we'll go at it that way. So here we go. New share. Are you guys seeing my screen?
We're seeing your desktop. So if you want to just maximize your slide, there we go.
All right. Geez, you know, ta-da. Okay. Well, so Jonathan has listed on the agenda ND-ISAC and how it assists in threat mitigation. We're going to touch on that as part of what we talked about. I started in the tee-up there. So what is ND-ISAC? As I mentioned, it's one of about 26 organizations that are encouraged by a constellation of policies that are promulgated by the Department of Homeland Security with respect to protecting the U.S.'s critical infrastructure. And among the different things that the Department of Homeland Security does as part of those policies is point at sectors of industry and suggest that they organize themselves to share information on threats. And so the National Defense ISAC is pointed toward the defense industrial base, which is one of 16 sectors of critical infrastructure. And we'll talk a little bit more about those things, those sectors, and how that's arranged in a following slide. But we're a nonprofit organization created by about 100 member companies today for the benefit of the members, and we work through about 4 lines of effort to perform our mission, which, as you see on the bottom of the slide there, is to enhance the security and the resilience of the member companies and the strategic partners. Now, a word about those member companies. They range from the large integrators, or the primes, as folks in the defense industrial base would describe them, on down to some very small firms. And so we cover a good spectrum of companies. We also have a number of companies as part of ND-ISAC that have footprints in some of the other sectors that we could touch on. And so it would sort of be non-obvious to observers to say, well, how are those companies members of the defense industrial base? But defense contractors have key interdependencies with companies in the financial sector, for example, the large banks, or companies in the chemical sector. So we have a pretty good selection of companies that have footprints in multiple sectors, and we think that gives us some interesting ability to tag against different information that affects, or threats that affect, those companies operating in other ways. So I started to mention 4 lines of effort. We maintain a trusted and valued cyber threat intel sharing. Now that by itself is not remarkable by any means, and other ISACs do focus on that sort of thing, as do other organizations that you may have heard referred to as ISAOs, Information Sharing and Analysis Organizations, another sort of entity that DHS has encouraged. But we think we have a little different take on that, because for 2 reasons. So if you're an ND-ISAC member, we make no distinctions in terms of tiering about your relative access to threat data. If you're a member, you're in the pool, whether you're Lockheed Martin on one end, or whether you're a very small firm on the other end. So you get access as a smaller, medium-sized business to the same thing that the larger companies are reporting and sharing within the threat portal. The other thing that's perhaps a bit different as well is, so in terms of the sharing ethos that we have within the ND-ISAC, all the sharing by members within the portal is attributional. If you're sharing it if you're a member in Acme Aerospace Fasteners, the other members within the portal understand that it's Acme and you as a cyber threat analyst, and so that is strengthened by a very clear set of agreements and non-disclosure processes that are promulgated within our member agreement, and by a very strong self-reinforcing ethos among our members. The number 2 thing we do is that we have a very energetic set of technical solution working groups, and we'll dive deeper into those in a moment, to assist our member companies about technical issues and some policy issues that affect all the companies. And so all of our working groups are led by member companies, subject matter experts, and we on the ND-ISAC staff help curate the content and the publications and the schedule, so that the work group members, and especially the work group leaders, can focus on the substance and not get swallowed by the administration. And so we think the working groups really create a real value for our members. Number 3, we understand that some companies in the supply chain, particularly as you move down it, won't have the capability or the resources to do some functions in cybersecurity on their own. So one of the things that we're presently involved in is developing a portfolio of services and capabilities that have broad applicability to our member companies, but particularly some advantages to the SMBs. And you'll see on the slide there, Security Scorecard is the first among those as a partner to us, and affording access to some capabilities that on either discounted pricing or complementary basis to our members. The last thing, similar to what we're doing here under Jonathan's stewardship, is we have recurring technical exchange events for our threat analysts and security engineers, and an annual summit for executives to talk about strategic level issues. And we've traditionally done about 3 of these a year altogether. And in fact, later today we have one for our membership. So moving on to the next slide, we sort of talked a little about this on slide 1. But one of the things I should add is that under that constellation of authorities that I mentioned, is that in addition to ISACs, the Department of Homeland Security also, as I had pointed to, encourages sectors of critical infrastructure to organize themselves to work issues in common and to be able to communicate those issues to the Department of Homeland Security. And those entities that are organized for that purpose are called Sector Coordinating Councils, Sector Coordinating Councils, or SCCs. And so the way the Department of Homeland Security looks at U.S. critical infrastructure today and defines it within policy, it divides the United States' critical infrastructure into 16 permanent sectors, one of which is the financial sector, as you would imagine. Another is energy. And for those sectors, Treasury, for example, is the sector-specific agency for the financial sector. Makes sense. And then for the energy sector, Department of Energy, as you would naturally expect, is the sector-specific agency for the industry sector coordinating council. And in fact, those policies that we pointed to also provide for a government coordinating council, a counterpart entity. And then the policies really point those two entities, the sector councils and the government sector, together at recurring intervals to work issues in common. And so that becomes a pretty interesting process. It's enabled by something that becomes very powerful, and it's because it falls under a policy in terms of another piece of those policies called the Critical Infrastructure Protection Advisory Council, or CPAC. And so the policy and legislation behind CPAC allowed DHS to confer an exemption to something called the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA. Now, if you circulate around Washington, D.C., you might have heard that. Others may have not, but it's a pretty important exemption, because here's what FACA otherwise calls for. It says that if you as an industry person are going to engage or participate or try to influence the government's decision-making process, you have to publish, and the government says, okay, let's have that meeting. Then the government has to publish advance notice of that meeting in the Federal Register. You have to meet, discuss whatever the issue you're going to have, and then you have to publish minutes of that meeting in the Federal Register. So an advance notice, meet, and then minutes published. And that becomes a really clunky way to iterate on tough solutions. But within under the umbrella of the CPAC, the Sector Coordinating Council and the Government Coordinating Council could get in the room, and the industry guys can say, you know, that thing that you're talking about doesn't work so well for industry in terms of a production issue or business efficiency issue, and you really ought to think about, you know, this alternative. Now, obviously, all of y'all are aware of defense industry trade groups, such as Professional Services Council or Aerospace Industries who can do lobbying, and that's one way to certainly influence the government's thought processes. But what CPAC provides for and endorses is, under that exemption I talked about, is the ability to participate in that process, and that can be very powerful. And so the reason I have gone on at some length about that is because ND-ISAC, by the January 2019 charter, promulgated by the DIB Sector Coordinating Council is the engine room for the DIB Sector Council. And so so we have the ability to support the dialogue among the members of the Sector Coordinating Council, which is any defense company can most any defense company can belong to that. There's no fee or cost to be part of that, but that becomes a way for defense contractors to be able to have a means to influence issues such as the cyber maturity model certification. And so let me give you an example how that has worked. So one of the things that the DIB Sector Coordinating Council did, and I have to give a tip of the hat to the chair of that, Mike Gordon, who's the Lockheed CISO, who revitalized the sector after some years, the council, after some years of it being sort of, well, moribund, I guess might be an accurate word. But one of the things that Mike Gordon kicked off with the CISOs of the prime or the integrators is a DIB supply chain, DIB SEC supply chain cybersecurity task force. And each of the primes committed 5 to 7 FTEs to that task force to iterate on some solutions that they believed would make a key difference to companies across the supply chain, from the largest to the smallest, but maybe do so in a way that were either more business efficient or friendlier to DIB company processes. And so that supply chain task force is differentiated into different working groups that I'll mention in a second, and it provides for participation for large company committing folks to it, as I mentioned, in the case of the bigs, if you will, 5 to 7 FTEs, but also recognizing that smaller companies don't have those sorts of resources, fashioned a way for those companies to consult. So here are the 5 working groups that they're charging on. Is shared sensors and the concept of a joint monitoring hub, for example, in contrast to perhaps the Department of Defense strapping that on. The shared assessment, and that's pointed directly at CMMC. And so one of the things that we have done in supporting that is the back shop, if you will, in ND-ISAC, is that we host on the ND-ISAC portal shared assist website. And you'll see different resources there that are differentiated from level 1 to level 5, and give any defense company kind of a roadmap for how to get smart, or one way of getting smart on CMMC. The other working group is on shared assist. And so how do you help companies across the defense industrial base, elevate their cybersecurity, be able to comply with a range of things that DoD is doing in terms of an evolving, I think, regulatory environment for defense companies, not just CMMC, but also National Defense Authorization Act FY19, Section 889B, in terms of identifying and pulling anything related to disallowed Chinese sourced components out of an enterprise. And then the other 2 working groups are cloud and DRM. So we have a nice synergy there between the ISAC, which is formed by its 100-member companies, all of whom pay dues according to a tiered schedule based on their revenue, but also intersecting with the Sector Coordinating Council to articulate and support the issues that are of concern to companies across the defense industrial base. And so we talked earlier about the first line of effort in terms of threat intelligence sharing. And so again, not uncommon that an information sharing and analysis center has a threat portal. Ours is and does secure sharing. And so within portal that's operates in a secure mode with Google Authenticator on the front end to allow access to company analysts who are provisioned into it. We have a set of active message boards that allow company threat analysts to post intelligence or analysis or malware samples, or I mean, in a very simple mode, say, hey, I'm seeing this, have you seen it? And if so, what did you do about it? We also added something that it makes a big difference, we think, and that's real-time communications via Mattermost real-time chat. You're going to hear later today from a fellow named Stutzman, and when Jeff Stutzman and I worked together at the DoD Cyber Crime Center and building an earlier collaboration for government for a government private public sharing initiative. One of the things that we desperately wanted but couldn't do within the DoD infrastructure was real-time chat, and of course, and so that's its own discussion about why we couldn't do it. But we have that available within ND-ISAC to the ND-ISAC member analyst. We also have a document repository that gives us a collected knowledge base in terms of what our companies are seeing in terms of threats. I should add that ISACs, by definition, are about all hazards, but compared to some of the other 26 ISACs, ND-ISAC is certainly disproportionately focused on cyber and cybersecurity issues because we think those are so cross-cutting across a range of things. For example, if you're a company with a concern about insider threat, the greater likelihood today is that insider threat is going to be operationalized through a cyber technique rather than, the James Bond stereotype of in the late 50s or 60s of someone either bringing in a miniaturized camera and taking pictures of a document or either copying documents on a photocopier. We think so. Cyber becomes, again, we think, a cross-cutting issue. Operationalizing that is also our cyber threat analyst group, which is a very solid group of extremely experienced cyber threat analysts across the member companies to meet and talk about direction or shift in terms of their concerns or what's the aperture we should be concerned about or the threat vectors we should be concerned about most immediately. And so we get a lot of input on the staff side from the analyst working group folks and pay real close attention to that. So moving on down, the U.S. government collaboration. We have, based on an initiative with the National Security Agency, set up a restricted compartment within our portal. And by restricted, I mean that's the only access that NSA analysts are provisioned access to, and our member companies who, at their discretion and totally at their discretion, can choose to dive into that piece of the portal and confer with NSA analysts on things that NSA may be seeing. And so I will tell you that is a direct knockoff of what the United Kingdom National Cybersecurity Center has done for their defense industry. And so this is the gameplay of nearly 2 years of conversation with the National Security Agency on how we model that and do that for the U.S. defense industry. We also have a similar piece of the portal restricted as a compartment for analysts from the Department of Defense Cyber Crime Center. We're under a CRADA, Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, that analysts from DC3 can load indicators of compromise or other data into that portal, and it's with the concept, or exploring the concept, if you will, that can cyber defense be improved by government furnished access to government furnished information compared to companies who are performing cyber defense with either organically developed indicators of compromise, or with that or commercially available threat streams. So we think we have a pretty solid threat sharing regime, but I would say that ISACs kind of work like and the benefit or value that members derive from ISACs, I would tell you, is kind of like having a health club membership. You know, it doesn't do you much good to carry that that card around in your pocket. You actually got to go to the gym and work out, right? And so we see far more satisfaction, I believe, from the members who are involved in the threat sharing processes, but also involved in the technical working groups. And so you'll see those differentiated across 4 broad areas: security operations, standards and compliance, security engineering, and cyber threat intel ops. And so we, again, all of these topics or working groups are framed around member company requirements for challenges that the company's members see presently, or that they anticipate coming down the road. Take security engineering, cloud security and architecture, or cloud servicing providers. And so one of the things that I believe is a huge value to members is to get involved in these. And it's a great place to see what has worked for another company in terms of how they have tackled a particular problem. And the obvious payoff there for another member is that there's a benefit in cost avoidance. If it's something that's not applicable to the second company's circumstances or operations, they don't have to go on an independent voyage of discovery to figure out maybe that isn't what we wanted to do. And so in terms of our focus in ND-ISAC and the working groups, we are very much pointed at, as very much a techie crowd, not so much a policy crowd like some of the other defense trade organizations. And perhaps the single exception where we touch policy may be in our cyber security policy and standards and regulations working group. And that's because CMMC, the Cyber Maturity Model Certification, has consumed so much oxygen in terms of the efforts of that group because of the influence and impact across the defense industrial base. And so that particular working group deconstructed the version 1 of CMMC before it was promulgated into 70 pages of comments and suggestions for DoD, and we put that attached that to a cover letter with some focus points for Katie Arrington and staff, and for, I think, really the first time ever, suggested that DoD should think about these suggestions in terms of how it might work better for industry while still achieving DoD's objectives. Now, I talked earlier about the DIB Sector Coordinating Council. We also took the effort of that to influence the deliberations of the Sector Coordinating Council and the Supply Chain Cybersecurity Working Group under the mantle of the CPAC mantle, and had very unvarnished conversations and discussions with Katie Arrington and staff and other DoD entities about how to best achieve DoD's concerns while shaping those in a way that provided for business efficiency, or in some cases talking about the effectiveness of a control or versus another. So there's a nice synergy again between the ND-ISAC and the DIB Sector Coordinating Council. The other line of effort, just as with we're doing today, we have and have had as part of ND-ISAC hosting a series of what you might term as technical exchanges between and among our cyber threat analysts and our security engineers, and once a year an executive summit for CISOs, CIOs, and chief security officers or other execs to meet and focus on corporate and strategic challenges that we think will affect the defense industrial base sector, and how to shape and provide industry perspective to the U.S. government, the Department of Defense, on cybersecurity strategy. The more frequent events are formally were, small conferences in a live mode, physical mode, that we did for security, cyber threat analysts and security engineers and architects, and typically divided into a couple of tracks with threat analysts meeting in one track, and then security engineers in another, and then we'd mix those up for common kind of discussion and networking. And so those have been a very popular feature among our members, and for the obvious reasons that we're doing a virtual today, or at least many of us, we've moved those for the indeterminate future to a virtual mode. In fact, as I mentioned, later today we have about 400 member company folks who are going to rendezvous in an ND-ISAC virtual presentation where we have a number of member company. That's another thing I should emphasize. All the presentations we have are led by member company subject matter experts in terms of presenting, hey, here's the case I saw within our company, here's what we did about it, here's how we handled it, here's some, some things that you might want to think about. And so that also provides good value, we think. One of the things that Jonathan asked me to touch on as part of what we do is what have we seen, or more accurately, what have our members seen in terms of things that are banging against their networks. And so, again, we developed this pie chart from looking at the inputs and essentially crowdsourcing data from our 100 or so member companies. And you'll see those differentiated in the pie chart there in terms of relative distribution of techniques and focus. You'll see Iran for a period of time occupied a lot of concern on the part of our member company analysts. Not surprisingly, I think this probably influences every company on the conference today here. Phishing is a persistent concern for our member companies. And of course, because it's perhaps the most common vector for delivering a malware payload. And so other aspects that you see there either fall into a general category or just discussions about different TTP. But the advantage here that we think is that these are based on observations that are not secondary or derivative reporting from someone or some other stream, but are directly from the proverbial horse's mouth about, no kidding, here's what I'm seeing operate on my network right now. Is anybody on the portal also seeing this? Let's sync up and work on this. So very just a snapshot in time right there. Diving a little deeper in terms of the 34%. Earlier in the year, as you all followed in the press, the United States undertook an action against a very senior Iranian official, and so that was the front end of a spin up where ND-ISAC members, developed quite a bit of concern and validated some activity on the part of the Iranians banging against or attempting to bang against defense industry interest. And so in terms of tactics and techniques and procedures reported, We had quite a bit of reporting and chat from member company analysts about the use of fake social media profiles that seems to be a stock and trade on the part of the Iranians. And then separate but sometimes or related to that, recon scanning of for vulnerabilities in different networks, and then accompanied by phishing attacks on member company networks. You know, the social media profiles were in concert with developing the reconnaissance and data to bolt together and craft a phishing attack, and then web shell exploitation. But that, again, a snapshot in time, but illustrative of the sort of discussion on the part of the members within the secure portal, and the companies and members who participate in that get that value and can use it at their discretion within the sharing controls that the member companies have agreed to. Again, every company, whether you're Bob's Aerospace Fastener as a small company, or whether you're Lockheed on the other end, and I mentioned Lockheed because they've given us permission to identify them as a member company. With our member agreements constrain us from identifying a member without their consent. But from one end to the other, every company, irrespective of size or dues tier, is sitting in the same threat stream, can use it at their discretion, and knows who the reporter is within the threat stream, because it's full attribution within the stream. And so that's all of those things go toward helping companies mitigate their issues. And so with that, that's sort of the baseball card summary of ND-ISAC, and so I'd subject to your questions for the next few minutes, ladies and gents.
So, Steve, I guess I'll refer you to the chat. There's a couple questions in the chat, so if you could kind of open that up and see if you can answer those.
Okay, let me see if I'm smart enough to find that, Jonathan. Okay. Let's see, will I get a link later? Let me talk to Jonathan about how we do that. I see Orly says there'll be a recording, so if you can, you'll be able to play that back and see my mug ad nauseum, I suppose. And
I have a question for you, Steve. Does the ND-ISAC, so it's membership based. Does it cost, is there a fee structure to become a member?
Yeah, yes, there is. And is this Jonathan?
Yes, sir, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan, there absolutely is. And all of the ISACs are a play to pay, or pay to play, excuse me, organization. You know, as I mentioned, we're created as a nonprofit, and with a board of with a governance structure, and a board of directors, and so we've differentiated the membership into a dues structure with the smallest or dues for a smaller company about the price of a mediocre office copier. At the top end, if you were a Lockheed, and based on the annual revenue of Lockheed, our dues at that level are $50K a year for companies of that size. At the bottom end, $3K a year. And so again, the difference with other ISACs is that some of them distinguish, you know, what you get access to within the services and capabilities based on what you're paying as a member. We made an intentional decision to flatten that so that if you're Bob's Aerospace lug nuts, you're going to have access to the same stuff that Lockheed has access to, whether it's the events, whether it's the working groups, or whether it's the threat stream. So does that get it to answer the question, Jonathan?
Yes, sir, it does.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, if a company wants to participate and be on the member listing of the Sector Coordinating Council, that's a no-fee organization. That's just complying with some very basic membership criteria. But obviously, we think you get a richer kind of experience if you have a foot in both the SEC and the ND-ISAC.
Right. Now that answered it, Steve. Thank you so much. I have, I think, two other questions. One is, what are the complementary tools offered to members? Are any tools specific to CMMC or the NIST compliance, NIST 800-171 compliance?
Yeah, so security scorecard is probably our best example there in terms of, I think most of you probably might have an idea. Security scorecard sniffs the so-called digital exhaust from your network and through a series of algorithms makes conclusions about your internal controls. And so security scorecard offers a complementary access to their full up enterprise platform for ND-ISAC members that's more than just the freemium version, but also as part of that, Jonathan offers access to their CMMC compliance module. And so you can get specific feedback as a company on how security scorecard is correlated, what they're seeing in terms of how that bumps up against CMMC controls. So I think perhaps that's probably the clearest example. Does that kind of get at the question?
Yes, sir. Yeah. One last question for you. Any insights into an average small business cost from a CMMC level 3 preparedness from being an ND-ISAC member?
So if the question is, what is it going to cost to comply to achieve level 3? Man, that's a pretty hot and topical question, and I'm not sure based on how the CMMC accreditation board and the C3PAO process is shaken out that we can make an accurate calculation on that. We do think, obviously, if you're a member of ND-ISAC, you'll have altogether better situational awareness about how to prepare for that, have access to some tools that come with ND-ISAC membership that'll better posture you. That said, the way that CMMC is currently structured, you're going to have to undergo an assessment to be independently validate a CMMC level 3, and that whole process and the cost of doing that is totally separate from ND-ISAC.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate your insights. Really excited to see where you're taking ND-ISAC and what the future holds for your organization. It's really good to see you, sir. And thank you so much for being available today to present.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate the invite, Jonathan. Always great to talk to you and talk to the folks that you're associated with. As I said earlier, I'm sorry I can't stay in it. I'd like to hear that Stutzman fella and Bob Armstrong and Bob Metzger. You got a real power hitter lineup there. So best of have a great rest of the day, and best wishes to you and all of the folks as part of the summit today. So thanks so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Steve.
We're out here.
Bye. We're going to take 2 minutes to transition. We're going to have our next speaker, Mr. Jonathan Lance from Trusted Internet, who's the Chief Operating Officer. So give us 2 minutes. This is going to be an in-person presentation. So we're going to go ahead and transfer over to the podium.